I sat across from Admiral Collins in the secure briefing room, trying to make sense of the classified images laid out between us. The windowless chamber deep within Naval Base Coronado hummed with the sound of industrial air conditioning. Collins slid a black and white sonar image toward me. "We found it 3 weeks ago during routine deep-sea mapping operations," he said. I picked up the image, studying the blurry object on the ocean floor. Something large and distinctly triangular sat at what looked like 18,000 feet below sea level. Based on the scale markers, each side measured roughly 50 meters. "And you believe this is extraterrestrial?" I kept my voice neutral, even as skepticism rose inside me. In my 15 years of naval diving operations, I'd seen everything from Soviet-era submarine wrecks to geological formations that looked man-made until you got close enough. "That's what you're going to tell me, Commander." Collins' weathered face gave away nothing as he passed me a folder stamped with red classification markers. "Our preliminary analysis suggests the object has no geological explanation. No volcanic activity in the area, no tectonic plate movement that could create such a perfect geometric shape." The images inside the folder showed the object from different sonar angles. Each reinforced its unnatural symmetry. I traced the edge of one image with my thumb. "What about human origins? Old Soviet or Chinese test equipment?" "Too large, too deep, and in completely international waters outside any known testing zone." Collins handed me another document. "And there's this." The paper contained readings of electromagnetic energy pulses coming from the object. I'm no physicist, but I recognized patterns that shouldn't exist naturally, especially not under the crushing pressure of the deep Pacific. "We've assembled a team," Collins continued. 2 MIT oceanographic specialists will accompany you. They've been told this is a geological anomaly survey. "They don't know what we're really looking at?" "Need to know basis. You and O'Brien have the clearance. The scientists don't." I leaned back in my chair, considering the implications. A deep-sea dive to 18,000 feet wasn't unprecedented, but it pushed the limits of our equipment and human endurance. I'd done similar depths before, but never with so many unknowns. "Have you showed these to O'Brien yet?" Collins nodded. "He's waiting outside. Wanted to brief you first, since you'll be lead on this." Of course O'Brien would be there already. My diving partner for the last 7 years had an almost supernatural sense for when we'd be called up for the unusual jobs. I felt a small measure of relief knowing he'd be with me on this one. "Timeline?" I asked. "You leave tomorrow for the USS Defender. She's been retrofitted with the advanced diving chamber and the DSV-4 submersible. 3-day journey to the coordinates, then immediate descent." Collins gathered the documents back into the folder. "This stays completely off record. If asked, you're conducting deep pressure testing on new equipment." I nodded, already mentally cataloging the equipment we'd need. My mind raced through past dives of similar complexity, calculating risks and contingencies. This was far from standard, but then nothing really had been since I joined the specialized Navy diving unit known informally as the Depths. "Any other teams get close to this thing yet?" Collins hesitated. That tiny pause told me everything. "We sent an ROV down last week, lost contact at 50 meters from the object. So we weren't the first approach. That changed things." "Equipment failure?" "Unknown. Complete signal loss. No recovery possible at that depth." I stood and walked to the situation map on the wall, locating the coordinates in the mid-Pacific. Remote, isolated. Perfect place to hide something, whether it came from above or below. "You'll have the new prototype pressure suits," Collins added. "Rated for 20,000 feet. The military applications alone justify this mission, Commander. If this object contains new materials or technology, and if it's actually extraterrestrial," I turned to face him. Collins met my eyes directly. "Then you're about to make history, or witness it." I thought about the implications. First confirmed contact with non-Earth technology would change everything, but something didn't add up. Why me? Why not a specialized science team with technical expertise? Because we need someone who's faced the unexpected before and made it back, Collins said simply. Your record speaks for itself. The Baltic Sea incident, the North Korean submarine recovery, the Caribbean cave system. He didn't mention the incident 5 years ago when I'd lost 2 team members during what should have been a routine recovery operation. The memory came anyway. Cold water, tangled lines, and the crushing weight of command decisions made too late. Collins rose from his seat. There's something else you should know. Initial sensor readings suggest the object isn't just sitting on the ocean floor. It appears to be partially embedded. Geological dating indicates the surrounding sediment hasn't been disturbed for approximately 10,000 years. I let that sink in. You're saying this thing has been down there for 10 millennia? At minimum, which makes it older than any known human civilization capable of such construction. The room felt suddenly smaller. I'd expected some classified military technology, or perhaps a natural formation with unusual properties. This was something else entirely. I'll need full control over dive parameters, I said, and I want O'Brien running comms and secondary systems. Granted, you'll have whatever you need. Collins extended his hand. The fate of this discovery is in your hands, Commander Morrison. I shook it firmly, wondering if he could feel my pulse quickening with a mix of professional excitement and deeper trepidation. This mission struck too close to things I'd spent years trying to forget. Send O'Brien in, I said. We'll need to start planning immediately. Collins walked to the door but paused before opening it. One more thing, Morrison. The MIT scientists believe they detected something like a harmonic frequency emanating from the object, almost like a beacon, or a warning. After Collins left, I stood alone with the classified images. The triangular object stared back at me from the depths, a perfect geometric anomaly in a world of organic randomness. Something about its precision made my skin crawl. The door opened and O'Brien walked in, his copper-red hair still damp from what I guessed was a recent training session in the base's dive tank. His eyes immediately went to the photos spread across the table. So that's it, he said without preamble. Our mysterious triangle. Looks that way. O'Brien picked up one of the sonar images, his expression unreadable. Collins brief you on the ROV they lost? Just the basics. Complete signal loss at 50 meters from the target. He nodded slowly. What's your take, Jake? Russian? Chinese? Collins says it's been down there 10,000 years. O'Brien whistled low. Well, that rules out the usual suspects. He studied me with a sideways glance. You okay with this one? After what happened with the Barents Sea dive? That was different. I cut him off, not wanting to revisit that particular memory. This is just an observation and documentation mission. Right. O'Brien didn't sound convinced. Just like that Venezuelan tunnel was just a survey until we found those smuggler submarines. I appreciated his attempt at normalizing the situation with gallows humor. It's why we worked well together. O'Brien knew when to push and when to back off. Meet the MIT specialists yet? I asked, changing the subject. Briefly, they're setting up their equipment in Lab 3. Seem competent enough, but they've never been below 5,000 feet. O'Brien leaned against the table. They don't know what this really is, do they? Not according to Collins. Great. Scientists who don't know what they're really looking for. Always ends well. He tapped the image of the triangle. You think it's really alien? I considered the question carefully. I think it's something we've never encountered before. Beyond that, I'm not jumping to conclusions. O'Brien nodded, accepting my non-answer. Well, whatever it is, beats training exercises and recovery operations. When do we start? Transport to the Defender leaves at 0600 tomorrow. We'll have 3 days to prep once we're on board. I'll get the gear ready. O'Brien gathered the photos into a neat stack. Standard deep-sea loadout plus the specialized equipment, and the new prototype suits Collins mentioned. O'Brien's eyebrows rose. The ones still technically in testing. Must be serious if they're letting those out of the lab. I began mentally categorizing everything we'd need. The submersible would handle most of the descent, but if we needed to exit the vehicle to investigate the object directly, those suits would be our only protection against pressure that could crush us in seconds. "How's the family?" I asked as we organized the briefing materials. O'Brien's expression softened slightly. "Katie started soccer last week. Amanda says she's terrorizing the other 4-year-olds. I smiled at the image. O'Brien's daughter had inherited his competitive spirit. "You should come for dinner when we get back," he said. "Amanda's been asking about you." Maybe. We both knew it was unlikely. I'd grown increasingly isolated over the years, pulling away from the social connections that once anchored my life. Since Sarah died, I'd found it easier to stay immersed in work. As if reading my thoughts, O'Brien said quietly, "It's been 5 years, Jake. 5 years since I'd watched them lower my sister's casket into the ground. 5 years of wondering if I could have prevented her death if I'd been there instead of halfway around the world on a classified dive. The rational part of me knew I couldn't have stopped the drunk driver who hit her car, but rationality had little power over guilt. We should focus on the mission," I replied, closing the subject. O'Brien respected my boundary with a slight nod. "I'll meet you at the transport bay tomorrow morning." After he left, I spent another hour reviewing the technical data on the object. The more I studied it, the more unnatural it seemed. Perfect angles in an environment where such precision shouldn't exist, especially not after 10 millennia underwater. That night in my sparse on-base quarters, I dreamed of the deep ocean. In the dream, I was descending alone in darkness, watching the pressure gauge climb to impossible numbers. Below me, something vast and triangular pulsed with internal light, and somehow, impossibly, I heard Sarah's voice calling from inside it. I woke at 4 in the morning, drenched in sweat despite the cool room. The details of the dream faded quickly, but the feeling of dread remained. I showered, packed my gear, and headed to the transport bay an hour early. The mission to the mysterious object was officially underway, and despite my years of experience with the unknown, I couldn't shake the feeling that this dive would be unlike anything I'd ever faced. The descent into darkness had been underway for nearly 2 hours. Inside our DSV-4 submersible, the air grew increasingly stale despite the life support systems working at full capacity. O'Brien sat at the navigation controls, his face bathed in the blue glow of instrument panels. The past 3 days aboard the USS Defender had been consumed with equipment checks and briefings with the MIT scientists, who remained oblivious to what we were really pursuing. "Passing 14,000 feet, O'Brien announced, his voice steady through our internal comms. "Hull integrity nominal, external pressure continuing to rise within expected parameters." I watched the depth gauge as the numbers steadily increased. Water pressure at this depth would crush an unprotected human body instantly. Even with our reinforced submersible, we were pushing the boundaries of what human technology could withstand. "Surface comms still clear," I reported, checking the communication system. "Defender reads us 5x5. The small cabin hummed with the sound of machinery keeping us alive. Outside our viewport, the powerful external lights cut through the abyssal darkness, illuminating nothing but empty water and the occasional marine snow. Tiny particles of organic matter drifting down from the world above. "Think we'll find anything interesting down here, Commander?" O'Brien asked, breaking the tension with his typical dry humor. "Or is this another wild goose chase courtesy of naval intelligence?" "Keep your eyes on those readings," I replied, not rising to the bait. "The last team lost an ROV down here." O'Brien nodded, returning his attention to the controls. "Sonar's active, but showing minimal returns. Bottom's coming up in about 20 minutes at current descent rate." I moved to the rear section of the submersible to check our equipment once more. The prototype pressure suits that would allow us to exit the vehicle if necessary, our specialized tools, and the recording devices. Everything was secured and ready, but I found myself rechecking each item anyway. 20 years of naval operations had taught me that thoroughness kept people alive. The submersible continued its downward journey, the hull occasionally creaking under the immense pressure. I returned to my seat beside O'Brien and studied the sonar display. The seafloor was beginning to take shape on the screen, a mostly flat plain of sediment that stretched into darkness. And then, at the edge of our scanning range, something else appeared. "There it is," O'Brien said quietly, his finger pointing to the distinct triangular shape on the screen. 16,000 feet and closing, about half a mile out from our current position. I leaned forward, studying the object. Even on the low-resolution sonar, its perfect geometry stood out against the natural randomness of the seafloor. 3 sides, each measuring 50 meters exactly, forming an equilateral triangle. "Adjust course," I instructed. "Bring us in slow, maintain altitude of 20 meters above the bottom when we reach it." "Aye, Commander." O'Brien's hands moved across the controls with practiced efficiency. "Adjusting course now. Estimated arrival at target in 7 minutes." I keyed the comms to update the surface team. "Defender, this is DSV-4. We have visual confirmation of target on sonar. Moving to intercept at minimum speed. We'll establish observation position approximately 300 meters from the object." The response came back immediately, Admiral Collins's voice clear despite the miles of ocean between us. "Confirmed, DSV-4. Proceed with caution. Remember protocol if you encounter anything unusual." "Copy that," I replied, then switched to internal comms. "Let's take this nice and easy, O'Brien. No surprises." O'Brien gave a short nod. 16,500 feet. Bottom coming up fast now. As we neared the seafloor, our external lights revealed a landscape few humans had ever seen. The abyssal plain stretched out before us, a desert of fine silt unmarked by current or life. Our submersible created gentle clouds of sediment as we maneuvered above it, careful not to stir up too much and obscure our vision. 200 meters to target, O'Brien reported, slowing to quarter speed. I activated the high-resolution cameras mounted on the exterior of our vessel. Beginning visual documentation. The first real glimpse of the object came as we cleared a small rise in the seafloor. Both of us fell silent at the sight. The triangle sat on the ocean floor with impossible precision, as if placed there deliberately rather than having fallen or crashed. Its surface was dark, not the reflective metal I had half expected, but something that seemed to absorb our lights rather than reflect them. No algae, no sediment, no signs of marine growth marred its perfect geometry, despite supposedly sitting in these depths for thousands of years. "That's not natural," O'Brien finally said, his voice low. "And it's not like any human tech I've ever seen." I had to agree. "Take us to 300 meters distance and hold position. Let's get a full scan before we move any closer." As O'Brien maneuvered the submersible into position, I studied the object through our viewport. Its edges were impossibly sharp, cutting through the seafloor with precision that shouldn't have survived millennia under these conditions. The surface appeared smooth at first glance, but as we drew closer, I could make out intricate patterns etched into the material, flowing lines and geometric shapes that hinted at purpose rather than decoration. "Beginning full-spectrum analysis," I said, activating the sensor suite. Sonar, thermal, electromagnetic. The words died in my throat as the object changed. A soft blue light began to pulse from within the triangular structure, visible through what might have been seams in its construction. The pulses started slow, once every few seconds, but gradually increased in frequency. "Are you seeing this?" O'Brien asked unnecessarily, his hands frozen over the controls. "Defender, we have unexpected activity," I reported into the comms. "The object is emitting pulses of blue light, no external changes to its structure detected." Static crackled through the speakers, Collins's voice breaking up. "Repeat. What kind of energy readings?" I checked the instruments. "Energy spike across the spectrum, particularly strong in the electromagnetic bands." The readings were climbing rapidly, far beyond anything we'd expected. The pulses seemed to be responding to our presence. As if confirming my observation, the light pattern changed. the pulses now forming complex sequences that reminded me of mathematical progressions. The blue glow intensified, casting eerie shadows inside our submersible. "Communications degrading," O'Brien reported, flipping switches in an attempt to boost our signal, losing telemetry feed to the surface. I tried the backup systems. "Defender, do you copy? We're experiencing interference from the object." More static, then fragments of Collins's voice. "Pull back. Not safe. Immediate." The light from the object suddenly flared brighter, flooding our viewport with blue radiance. The instrument panel flickered, gauges jumping wildly. O'Brien fought with the controls as our submersible drifted sideways, no longer responding properly to input. "Power fluctuations throughout all systems," he said tensely. "Whatever that thing's putting out is affecting our electronics." I moved to help stabilize the systems when the first flash hit me, not from outside, but inside my own mind. For a split second, I was no longer in the submersible, but standing on a suburban street. Rain fell around me. Headlights approached too fast. A woman's scream cut through the night. "Sarah." The vision vanished as quickly as it had come, leaving me gasping and gripping the console for support. "Jake?" O'Brien's voice seemed distant. "You okay?" Before I could answer, I saw him stiffen, his eyes going wide. His hands trembled on the controls as he stared at something only he could see. "Amanda," he whispered. "Katie." The moment passed, and he blinked rapidly, shaking his head as if to clear it. "What the hell was that?" "Some kind of hallucination," I managed, my heart racing. The object might be affecting our brain chemistry somehow. The blue pulses had synchronized with something, perhaps our heart rates or brain waves, creating patterns that seemed almost communicative. I fought to maintain focus on our immediate problem. "Try emergency restart on the propulsion systems," I ordered. "We need to pull back." O'Brien nodded shakily and began the restart sequence. "Systems cycling. Should come back online in 20 seconds. I tried the communications again. "Defender, we are experiencing system failures and psychological effects, attempting to withdraw to safe distance." Nothing but static came back. The restart completed, and O'Brien engaged the thrusters. Propulsion restored, backing away now. The submersible didn't move. Instead, the hull vibrated as our engines strained against an invisible force. "We're stuck," O'Brien said, increasing power. "No, not stuck. Something's pulling us." I looked out the viewport and confirmed his assessment. Despite our engines running at emergency power to reverse course, we were slowly moving toward the triangular object. "Some kind of tractor beam?" O'Brien asked, half joking through his obvious tension. "Unknown," I replied, checking our instruments for any explanation. "Magnetic fields off the charts. Could be some kind of electromagnetic attraction." Another flash hit me. This time I saw Sarah's face, pale and still in her casket. Her eyes suddenly opened, staring directly at me with accusation. I fought against the vision, forcing myself back to reality. O'Brien was having his own struggle, his breathing rapid and shallow as he continued fighting the controls. "Can't break free. Whatever's got us is getting stronger." The blue light pulsed faster now, almost strobing. Our submersible continued its inexorable movement toward the object, now less than 200 meters away. "Defender Mayday," I called into the dead comms. "We're being pulled toward the object against our control. Propulsion ineffective. Request immediate." The communication system emitted a high-pitched whine before going completely silent. All external connections were severed. Another vision flashed, Sarah's voice impossibly clear. "Why weren't you there, Jake? You could have saved me." I forced myself to focus. "O'Brien, prepare the pressure suits. If we can't pull away, we need to be ready for whatever happens when we reach that thing." He nodded grimly, securing the controls before moving to the storage compartment. "What do you think it wants?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "But I don't think it's just some ancient artifact anymore." The submersible continued its unwilling approach, now just 100 meters from the object. The blue light had become constant rather than pulsing, bathing everything in its unnatural glow. I helped O'Brien prepare the pressure suits, our movements made clumsy by the increasingly frequent hallucinations that assaulted us both. The triangle grew larger in our viewport as we were pulled closer. At 50 meters, the same distance where the ROV had been lost, our electrical systems began to fail one by one. Emergency power kicked in, keeping life support functioning, but little else remained operational. Hull integrity still holding, O'Brien reported, checking the manual gauges. But we're completely cut off now. Through the viewport, I could see new details of the object. What had appeared to be solid faces from a distance now revealed intricate patterns that shifted and moved, as if the surface itself was fluid despite its apparent solidity. And at the center of one face, something that looked disturbingly like an entrance began to appear, an opening that hadn't been visible before. "It's changing," I said, "reconfiguring itself." O'Brien looked up from the pressure suit he was preparing. "Almost like it's inviting us in." Another flash. Sarah again, but different this time. She stood in a corridor I didn't recognize, beckoning to me, her face serene. "Jake, we've got maybe 30 seconds before contact," O'Brien warned, bringing me back to reality. "What's the plan?" I made the only decision I could under the circumstances. Secure everything, brace for impact or whatever's about to happen. We finished our preparations just as the submersible reached the triangular object. Instead of the collision I expected, our vessel slowed gently as it approached the opening that had formed in the object's surface. The blue light engulfed us completely now, making it difficult to see anything beyond our immediate surroundings. "This isn't possible," O'Brien whispered as our submersible was drawn into the opening, which expanded to accommodate our size perfectly. The last thing I saw before we were completely enveloped was the seafloor falling away beneath us, as if the laws of physics no longer applied. We weren't just entering a structure on the ocean floor. We were going somewhere else entirely. The lights inside our submersible flickered once, twice, and then failed, plunging us into darkness, lit only by the alien blue glow from outside. We were trapped now, cut off from the world above, being drawn deeper into a mystery that had waited 10,000 years for our arrival. Complete darkness surrounded us, broken only by the ethereal blue glow filtering through the viewport. The submersible had stopped moving, suspended in what should have been the interior of the triangular object. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized we weren't inside a solid structure at all. "What the hell are we looking at?" O'Brien whispered, his face cast in that unnatural blue light as he pressed against the viewport. I joined him, trying to make sense of what lay beyond. We faced a vast open space that couldn't exist within the confines of the triangular object we'd observed from outside. The space stretched impossibly in all directions, defying the physical dimensions we'd measured. Stars, or what looked like stars, filled the blackness above and below us, though we remained nearly 3 miles beneath the ocean's surface. Our submersible hung suspended in this impossible void, as if gravity had simply decided to take a break. I checked the external sensors, but they were giving nonsensical readings: atmospheric pressure where there should be crushing ocean depth, temperature fluctuations that switched between freezing and burning within seconds. "We need to suit up," I decided. "Whatever this place is, we need to see it firsthand." O'Brien nodded, his hands already moving to the prototype pressure suits. "Good thing these are rated for vacuum too," he said, attempting a weak joke that fell flat in the strange atmosphere of our situation. We helped each other into the advanced suits, checking seals and systems with the practiced efficiency of men who'd done this 100 times before. The suit's internal power came online, illuminating our helmets with status readouts. "Communications check," I said through the suit system. "Reading you," O'Brien confirmed. "Suit system's nominal. But Jake, where exactly are we planning to walk to?" It was a fair question. Outside our viewport, the starlit void had begun to change. Surfaces were materializing, corridors, walls, and floor sections appearing as if being drawn into existence by an invisible hand. The structure seemed to be building itself around our submersible, creating a space for us to enter. "I think it's inviting us in," I said, unable to keep the unease from my voice. The airlock cycle took 30 seconds, longer than usual, as the suit computers struggled to make sense of the environment outside. When the outer door finally opened, I expected to feel the rush of water, the crush of depth. Instead, I stepped out into what felt like normal gravity, onto a surface that looked like polished black stone but felt slightly yielding beneath my boots. O'Brien followed close behind me. "Air pressure reads normal," he said incredulously, checking his suit readings. "Temperature stable at 70 degrees. How is this possible at 18,000 feet underwater?" I had no answer. The corridor we found ourselves in stretched about 20 feet ahead before splitting into 3 branches. The walls were the same black material as the floor, with those strange flowing patterns we'd observed from outside now visible up close, lines and symbols that seemed to move when I wasn't looking directly at them. "Stay close," I instructed, taking point as we moved forward. Our helmet lights cut sharp beams through the blue-tinged darkness, reflecting off the polished surfaces. We had traveled perhaps 15 feet when I heard it, a sound that couldn't exist here, in this impossible place beneath the ocean. Car tires screeching, metal crushing against metal, glass shattering. The sounds hit me like physical blows, and I staggered, reaching out to steady myself against a wall that wasn't there anymore. The corridor around us had changed, vanished, replaced by a rain-slicked street I recognized instantly. Maple Avenue, Sarah's neighborhood. "No," I gasped, trying to focus on reality. "This isn't real." But the scene unfolded with horrific clarity. Headlights approached too fast around the corner. Sarah's small blue Honda pulled out from a side street. The impact, devastating and final, as the drunk driver's SUV crushed the driver's side door. I tried to move, to run to the wreckage, but my feet wouldn't obey. Just like in real life, I was too far away to help. Except this time, I was forced to watch what I'd only imagined before. Sarah, trapped in the crushed vehicle, calling my name. "Jake, why aren't you here? You promised you'd always be there when I needed you." "Morrison!" O'Brien's voice broke through, his hand gripping my shoulder hard enough to feel through the suit. "Jake, snap out of it. Whatever you're seeing isn't real." The street scene flickered like bad reception, Sarah's broken body merging with the black corridor that reasserted itself around us. I blinked hard, forcing myself back to our current reality, however strange it might be. "I saw it," I said, my breath coming fast. "The accident. Sarah." O'Brien's face through his helmet visor was pale but determined. "It's toying with us, using our memories somehow." Before I could respond, O'Brien himself went rigid. His eyes fixed on something behind me, widening with horror. I turned, but saw only the empty corridor. "Amanda," he whispered. "Katie? No, get away from them." He lunged forward at invisible attackers, his movements frantic and uncoordinated. I grabbed him, holding him back from whatever nightmare he was experiencing. "O'Brien, it's not real." His eyes cleared gradually as he focused on my face. They were. I saw my family. Home invasion. Things that never happened. He shook his head sharply. "This place is getting into our heads." We pressed on, having no choice but to move forward. The corridor continued to shift and change around us, sometimes stretching endlessly, other times constricting until we had to move single file. Doorways appeared and disappeared without pattern. Gravity itself seemed negotiable, occasionally lifting us slightly off our feet before dropping us back down. "It's almost like it's testing us," O'Brien observed after we'd navigated a particularly disorienting section where the walls had rippled like water. "Seeing how we respond." I was about to agree when the corridor opened suddenly into a circular chamber about 30 feet across. The center of the room held what looked like a pool of liquid darkness, perfectly still and reflecting nothing. "What is this place?" O'Brien asked, moving closer to examine the pool. As he approached, I noticed something odd about his movements, a slight delay as if his image was lagging behind his actual position. The effect was subtle but unmistakable. "O'Brien, stop," I called out. "Something's wrong." He turned back toward me, his face confused. "What do you mean?" The room around us pulsed once, the blue light intensifying, and suddenly there were two O'Briens, identical in every way, both looking equally real, both wearing the same expression of shock as they noticed each other. "Morrison?" they said in unison, then looked at each other with horror. I reached for my sidearm instinctively, though I knew it would be useless here. "Which one of you is real?" "I am," they both insisted simultaneously. The room pulsed again, and now there were two of me as well. I could see myself standing 10 feet away, looking just as confused as I felt. "It's creating duplicates," the other me said, his voice identical to my own. "Or illusions." The scene dissolved around us like smoke, the duplicates vanishing, and we found ourselves back in a corridor different from the one we'd entered. This one was wider, its ceiling higher, with what looked like ancient writing carved into the walls. O'Brien, the real O'Brien, stood beside me, his breathing heavy inside his helmet. "Did you see that?" he asked. "I saw two of you." "And I saw two of you," I confirmed. "This thing, it's playing with our perception, making us question what's real." We continued forward cautiously. The corridor bent at impossible angles, sometimes forcing us to walk on what had been walls moments before. Gravity shifted with each turn, always reorienting to keep our feet on whatever surface we were traversing. The next hallucination hit without warning, more vivid than before. I was back in my apartment 5 years ago. My phone rang. I answered to hear the police officer's voice telling me about Sarah. I felt the exact same gut-wrenching pain, the disbelief, the denial. Then I was at the hospital, looking down at her body, the doctor explaining that she had died instantly, that she hadn't suffered. A lie meant to comfort. The hallucination showed me what really happened. Sarah, conscious after the impact, calling my name as life left her. No one to hold her hand. No one to tell her it would be okay. "I was on a classified dive," I whispered, the words torn from me against my will. I couldn't even take the call until hours later. She died alone because of me. "Morrison," O'Brien's voice again, pulling me back. He stood in front of me, gripping both my shoulders. "It's not real. Whatever you're seeing, it's not real." I forced myself to focus on his face. "It feels real. That's what it wants." O'Brien's voice was strained. I noticed he was fighting his own battle, his eyes occasionally darting to threats only he could see. "It's getting stronger, feeding off our reactions somehow." As if in response to his observation, the corridor around us warped dramatically, the walls curving inward to form a new chamber. This room was filled with mirrors, dozens of them, each reflecting our suited figures from different angles. But as I looked closer, I realized the reflections weren't quite right. In some, I wore civilian clothes. In others, my expression was wrong, angry or terrified when I was trying to maintain calm. O'Brien moved toward one mirror, his hand outstretched. "That's not me," he said, staring at his reflection. In the mirror, O'Brien wasn't wearing a suit, but instead his naval uniform, his face haggard and eyes empty. As we watched, the reflection reached up and pressed its palm against the inside of the glass. O'Brien jerked back. "Jesus!" All around the chamber, the reflections began moving independently of us, some pleading silently, others raging, still others simply staring with dead eyes. "Don't touch the mirrors," I warned, feeling a certainty I couldn't explain. "That's what it wants." We backed toward the center of the chamber, keeping our distance from the increasingly agitated reflections. The blue light that had been our constant companion since entering this place intensified, pulsing in rhythm with what felt like my own heartbeat. And then, as suddenly as they had appeared, the mirrors were gone. We stood in a simple circular room with a single exit, a doorway that led to blackness. O'Brien looked at me, his face barely visible through his visor in the dimmed light. "What is this place, Jake? Some kind of alien spacecraft?" I shook my head slowly as understanding dawned. Not a spacecraft, something worse. The pieces were coming together. The psychological torment, the manipulation of our fears and guilt, the way it seemed to feed on our emotional responses. "It's a prison." O'Brien's eyes widened slightly. "A prison? For what?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But think about it. The perfect triangle, untouched after 10,000 years. The way it manipulates perception, the containment of something inside rather than protection from something outside." I gestured to the corridor around us. "This isn't just technology beyond our understanding. It's technology designed to trap and control something." As if triggered by my realization, the blue light suddenly condensed in front of us, forming a swirling vortex in the air. Within the vortex, shapes began to take form, not solid, but clearly intentional. A language of light and shadow that somehow conveyed meaning directly to my mind. Ancient, prisoner, danger. The meaning came in fragments, impressions, rather than words. I could tell from O'Brien's expression that he was receiving the same communication. "It's trying to tell us something," he said. More concepts flooded in: containment, punishment, eternity. And finally, with terrible clarity, feeding. The vortex collapsed, plunging us into darkness for several seconds before the blue ambient light returned, now pulsing slowly like a heartbeat. "This place wasn't built by humans," I said, the truth settling cold in my stomach. "It was built to contain something that feeds on fear and guilt, our fear and guilt." O'Brien stepped backward, bumping into a wall that hadn't been there moments before. "You're saying we're not just inside some alien artifact. We're inside a prison with the prisoner. And I think we just woke it up." The corridor ahead of us, which had been empty seconds before, now showed a figure in the distance, human-shaped but wrong somehow, its proportions subtly off. It stood motionless, watching us. "Is that another hallucination?" O'Brien asked, his voice barely audible. I wasn't sure, but as we watched, the figure began to change, its outline blurring, spreading like ink in water. It grew larger, darker, filling the corridor ahead with a presence that felt ancient and malevolent. "I think that's our prisoner," I said quietly. The darkness condensed again, taking the rough shape of a person, but one made of shadow and absence rather than substance. As it moved toward us, I felt a cold certainty wash over me. We were no longer exploring this place. We were trapped in it, just like the entity it had been designed to contain. And whatever psychological torments we'd experienced so far were merely its way of testing our vulnerabilities, learning how best to feed on our minds. O'Brien and I backed away as the shadow entity advanced, but the corridor behind us had sealed itself off. No exit, no escape. "What do we do?" O'Brien asked, his voice steady despite the fear I knew he must be feeling. Before I could answer, the entity stopped its advance. It hovered before us, shapeless, yet somehow focused, like a predator assessing its prey. Then it spoke, not with sound, but directly into our minds, using our own voices, our own memories, to form words we could understand. "Welcome," it said, the concept tinged with hunger. "I've been waiting a very long time for new minds." The words weren't spoken. They invaded. Each syllable pressed into my consciousness like fingers pushing through clay, leaving impressions that felt both alien and strangely familiar. The entity hovered before us, a mass of darkness that seemed to pull light into itself rather than merely block it. "What are you?" I asked, my voice steady despite the cold dread filling my chest. The shadow swirled, its edges constantly reforming like smoke underwater. When it replied, I heard my own voice layered with others, some human, some decidedly not. I am the forgotten one, the imprisoned, the devourer of sorrow. O'Brien backed against the wall beside me. It's in my head, Jake, he whispered. I can feel it, searching. I could feel it too, like someone rifling through files, pulling out memories at random, examining them before moving to the next. The sensation made my skin crawl beneath the pressure suit. You carry such delicious pain, the entity continued, its form stretching toward us. The shadow coalesced into something vaguely humanoid, though its proportions were wrong, limbs too long, torso too thin. Your guilt is exquisite, Commander Morrison. So fresh, even after 5 years. Stay out of my head, I warned, though I knew the threat was empty. We had no weapons that could harm something like this. The entity made a sound that might have been laughter, a discordant noise that echoed both in the air and inside my mind. Your sister's death weighs on you like an anchor. The shadow twisted, taking a new shape, Sarah's shape. Her face formed from darkness, eyes hollow, yet somehow full of accusation. You weren't there when I needed you most, Jake. That's not her, I said, more to myself than to O'Brien. It's using her against me. The Sarah shadow smiled with too many teeth. Clever human. Yes, I use what I find. Your memories provide such wonderful tools. What do you want from us? O'Brien demanded, his voice cracking slightly. The entity's attention shifted. Its form rippled and changed again, becoming darker, more concentrated. Want? I want what any prisoner wants. Freedom. The entity's form expanded suddenly, filling the corridor from floor to ceiling. I was contained here by my own kind, locked away for what you might call crimes. What crimes? I asked, trying to keep it talking while I searched for any way out of this situation. The entity paused, its form becoming eerily still. I fed too deeply. I took too many. My shadow image spread through the space, slipping between stars like one of my kind should not. It was hard to follow its meaning. The concepts came wrapped in alien perspective, fragments of knowledge that didn't quite translate. They feared what I might become if left unchecked. They built this prison, this perfect geometric cage, and sealed me inside, deep beneath your world's ocean where no intelligent life would find me. Its form contracted suddenly, condensing into a tight knot of darkness directly before me. Until now. The way it said those 2 words made my heart beat faster. There was anticipation in its voice, hunger barely contained. How long have you been here? I asked. By your measurement? 10,000 years. 10,000 years of isolation, of starvation. The shape stretched, reaching tendrils toward both of us without quite touching, until your people began sending machines to these depths. Small electronic minds, tasteless, but enough to sense, enough to call to. The ROV, I realized, the one that had disappeared a week ago. This thing had somehow lured it here, used it as bait to bring something more substantial, us. Jake, O'Brien said quietly, we need to get back to the submersible. The entity's form shuddered, and I felt its amusement like ice water down my spine. Your vessel is no longer accessible. You are here now, with me, until I have had my fill. The implications turned my blood cold. You feed on us, on our minds. Not your minds, Commander, your suffering, your fear, your guilt, the rich emotional energy humans carry. It sustains me. It moved closer to O'Brien, whose breathing had become rapid and shallow. This one carries worry for his child, for his wife, fear of failing them, of not returning home. O'Brien flinched as if struck. I could see his eyes darting back and forth, tracking things that weren't there. The entity turned back to me. But you, Commander, your pain is exceptional. The guilt you carry over Sarah, pure. pure and untouched by healing. You've kept it fresh all these years, haven't you? Punishing yourself, denying yourself connection, isolating, making her death meaningful by making your life meaningless. Stop it, I said, the words coming out sharper than I intended. The shadow shape contracted again, becoming almost child-sized. I can give her back to you. 5 simple words that hit me like a physical blow. I knew it was lying, had to be lying, yet something inside me responded anyway. A desperate, irrational hope. That's impossible, I said. Is it? The entity asked, its voice softer now. Your human understanding of reality is so limited. I exist outside your conception of possibility. To demonstrate, it changed again, not just its appearance, but the entire room around us. Suddenly, we stood in my sister's living room, complete in every detail down to the scratches on her coffee table and the smell of the jasmine candles she always burned. The entity itself had vanished, replaced by Sarah, whole and alive, smiling at me from her favorite armchair. "Jake," she said, her voice exactly as I remembered it. "I've missed you so much." I felt tears burning behind my eyes. "This isn't real," I said, though the room felt solid around me. The temperature, the sounds from the street outside, the afternoon light slanting through her blinds, all perfect reproductions. "Does it matter?" Sarah asked, standing up. She walked toward me, and I could hear her footsteps on the hardwood floor. "I'm here now. We can have all the time we lost." My throat tightened. Part of me wanted desperately to believe, to accept what I was seeing. But another part, the part that had survived 2 decades of naval operations, recognized the manipulation for what it was. "You're not my sister," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. "You're using her memory against me." Sarah's face flickered, disappointment replacing her smile. The room around us wavered like heat rising from pavement. "You refuse the comfort I offer?" the entity asked, its voice overlaying Sarah's. "Very few do." The living room dissolved, returning us to the impossible corridor deep beneath the ocean. The entity resumed its shadowy form, hanging in the air before us. I turned to check on O'Brien and found him staring at nothing, his eyes wide and unblinking. His lips moved, forming words I couldn't hear. "What are you doing to him?" I demanded. "Showing him what he wants most," the entity replied. "A future with his family, safety, security. He's more receptive than you." I grabbed O'Brien's shoulders, trying to break whatever spell held him. "O'Brien, Lieutenant Commander, look at me." His eyes remained fixed on something beyond my shoulder, a smile spreading across his face. "They're safe," he whispered. "It's keeping them safe." "There's nothing there," I said, turning him away from whatever hallucination the entity was feeding him. "It's lying to you." The entity's form expanded, surrounding us like a living darkness. "Why struggle, Commander? I offer peace, reunion, an end to pain." "At what cost?" I asked, still holding on to O'Brien, who had begun to tremble. "Freedom," it replied simply. "This prison has held me too long. Help me escape, and I will give you Sarah. Not a memory or illusion, her soul, restored. I have that power." I wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it, but something in the entity's tone stopped me. There was certainty there, confidence, as if it truly believed it could deliver what it promised. "And if I refuse?" "Then I will take what I need anyway," the entity said, its form contracting to a tight, dense point of darkness. "But it will be much less pleasant for you and your friend." As if to demonstrate, O'Brien suddenly screamed, his body going rigid. He clawed at his helmet as if trying to tear it off. "Stop it!" I shouted. "Leave him alone!" The entity complied, and O'Brien sagged against me, gasping. "Katie," he muttered. I saw Katie drowning. I couldn't reach her. I held him upright, glaring at the shadow entity. "How do you expect us to free you? We're just 2 people in pressure suits." "You underestimate your value, Commander." The entity's form shifted again, becoming more defined, almost solid. The prison requires conscious intent to open. My kind made sure of that, a final cruelty. I cannot leave unless willingly released by a sentient being. So that's why you lured us here, I said, understanding dawning. You need us to let you out. Yes. The entity seemed to sigh, the sound rustling through my mind. For millennia, nothing intelligent came close enough to sense. Then your people began exploring these depths. I called to them. Most ignored me. Some came close. A few entered. A chill ran through me. Others have been here, inside this place. The entity's form rippled with what might have been satisfaction. Yes, scientists, explorers, military, some by accident, others by design, none strong enough to help me. Their minds broke too quickly. You killed them, I said, the accusation flat and certain. Consumed them, the entity corrected, as if the distinction mattered. Their fear, their pain, their final moments. It has sustained me, allowed me to grow stronger. Strong enough now to reach further, to call more precisely. My mind raced through implications. If it was telling the truth, other expeditions had encountered this thing. Other people had stood where we stood now, faced the same choices, the same manipulations, and they had all failed, their minds broken, their bodies. What? Left inside this place as empty husks? Jake, O'Brien's voice brought me back to the present. He sounded more lucid now, his eyes clear as they met mine. Don't listen to it. This thing is playing with us. The entity's attention swung to O'Brien, its darkness intensifying. The man speaks truth, it acknowledged. I do play. I have been alone for so long. But my offer stands. Help free me, Commander Morrison, and I will reunite you with Sarah. And what happens after? I asked. If we let you out, what will you do? Feed, it answered simply. Live. Exist. Feed on who? Other humans? Their pain and fear? The entity's form contracted slightly, as if considering. I must sustain myself. By torturing and consuming minds, I translated. By using people's worst fears against them until they break. The entity didn't deny it. Its darkness pulsed like a heartbeat. She misses you, Jake, it said, changing tactics. Sarah waits in darkness, alone. I can bring her back, give her life again. A real life, not just memory or illusion. I felt my resolve waver. The rational part of me knew this was manipulation, knew the entity was using my greatest weakness against me. But another part, the part that had never stopped grieving, wanted desperately to believe. What exactly do we need to do? I asked, ignoring O'Brien's sharp look. The entity's form seemed to brighten, though it remained pure darkness. The center chamber, the pool you saw, it is the lock. Place your hands in it, both of you, and will the door to open. Think of release, of freedom. Your combined intent will break the seal. And then you'll bring Sarah back? After I am free, yes. The entity's voice softened, becoming almost gentle. She will live again. You will have the sister you lost. The guilt you carry will finally end. It was tempting, more tempting than anything I'd ever faced. 5 years of grief and guilt wiped away. Sarah back among the living. A second chance. But something nagged at me. Something the entity had said earlier. These others who came before us, I said slowly. Did you make them the same offer? The entity went perfectly still. Some, it admitted finally. Those who carried deep loss, deep pain. And did you fulfill your promise to them? I never gained my freedom, it replied, evading the question. The bargain remained uncompleted. But you would have kept your word? If they had freed you? The entity's form fluctuated, expanding and contracting rapidly. What I offer is possible. That is all you need know. Its evasiveness told me everything. This creature had no intention of bringing Sarah back. likely had no such power at all. It was simply using my grief as leverage, dangling an impossible hope before me to secure its release. I felt anger replace my momentary weakness. "You're lying. You can't bring back the dead. You just want out of your cage." The entity's darkness intensified, pressing closer. "You doubt me? After what you've seen here? This place exists outside your understanding of reality, Commander. My powers are beyond your comprehension." "I don't think they are," I said, my voice steady now. "I think you're just a predator, a parasite that feeds on suffering and fear. Your own kind locked you away because you couldn't control your hunger, and now you're trying to manipulate your way to freedom so you can keep feeding." The entity's form convulsed violently. The corridor around us shuddered as if in response to its rage. "You know nothing of my kind," it roared, the words causing physical pain inside my skull. "I am beyond your primitive understanding." The walls of the corridor began to warp and twist. Gravity seemed to fluctuate, first crushing us down, then nearly lifting us off our feet. O'Brien gripped my arm to stay upright. I was right, I realized. The entity had dropped its manipulative facade, revealing the rage beneath. It hadn't expected to be challenged, had grown too used to victims who succumbed to its illusions. "We're leaving," I told O'Brien, pulling him toward where I thought our submersible might be. "Now." "You cannot leave," the entity thundered, its form spreading to block our path. The darkness expanded, filling the corridor ahead and behind. No one leaves. Something changed in the air around us, a pressure that had nothing to do with ocean depth. I felt the entity pressing against my mind, trying to force its way past my defenses. And suddenly, I understood what had happened to those who came before. Their minds hadn't simply broken from fear or despair. They'd been invaded, consumed from the inside out by this creature's hunger. "It's getting stronger," O'Brien gasped beside me. "I can feel it, pushing." He was right. Each second, the mental pressure increased. Images from my past flashed before my eyes. Sarah's funeral, the empty apartment I returned to after her death, the countless nights spent alone with guilt as my only companion. But mixed with my memories were others, strange, alien experiences that didn't belong to me. A vast starscape, viewed through senses beyond human comprehension. The sensation of moving between worlds without a physical form. The hunger, ancient and insatiable, for the rich emotional energy of conscious minds. "It's showing us what it is," I said through gritted teeth, "what it was before imprisonment." O'Brien nodded, his face pale beneath his helmet. "A predator. It hunted intelligent life across somewhere, not here, not Earth." The entity's rage softened, replaced by cold calculation. "Yes," it admitted, its voice calmer now. "I hunted. I fed. I grew strong. Too strong for the others' comfort. They feared what I might become." "So they locked you away," I said, "to protect other worlds from you." "A prison built to last eternity," it agreed. "Deep beneath your world's ocean, where no intelligent life would find me, where I would starve in isolation. But then we developed the technology to reach these depths," I continued, the pieces falling into place. "And you sensed our minds." "Yes, weak signals at first, probes, machines with simple electronic brains, then bigger ones, research vessels, submarines. I called to them. Most ignored me or did not hear, but some came close enough." "The missing ships," O'Brien said. "The expeditions that vanished without trace." I recalled newspaper headlines from years past, research vessels lost in the Pacific, crews never found despite extensive searches, stories most people forgot quickly, attributed to storms or human error or equipment failure. But now I wondered how many had actually been lured here, to this impossible place beneath the waves. "How many?" I demanded. "How many people have you taken?" The entity's form pulsed with what might have been pride. Enough to grow strong. Enough to call more precisely. to reach into your world and touch minds that might help me. The pressure against my consciousness increased. I saw Sarah again, not as she had been in life, but as the entity imagined she could be, perfect, whole, smiling at me with forgiveness in her eyes. "It's not too late, Jake," the false Sarah whispered. "We can still be together. You just have to help it. Free it. Then I'll be back with you." I forced the image away, concentrating on what was real, the pressure suit around my body, O'Brien beside me, the entity's dark presence filling the corridor. "We're not letting you out," I said firmly, "no matter what you show us, no matter what you promise." The entity's rage returned, its form writhing like a storm cloud. "Then you will join the others," it howled. "Your minds will feed me, your bodies will rot here while I grow stronger." The corridor around us began to change again, walls melting away to reveal other spaces. And in those spaces, I saw them, the others who had come before us. Some wore diving gear from decades past. Others were dressed in research uniforms from various nations. All stood motionless, eyes vacant, expressions frozen in their final moments of terror or despair. "My God," O'Brien whispered beside me, "it keeps them, like trophies." Or batteries, I thought, each empty shell still connected to the entity somehow, their final moments of fear and pain replayed endlessly to feed its hunger. "I will add you to my collection," the entity promised, its voice soft again. "Your fear is potent, your guilt exquisite. You will feed me for years to come." It pressed harder against. I sat at the airlock controls, trying to steady my shaking hands. Our escape from the entity's corridors back to our submersible had felt too easy. The entity's final threat echoed in my mind. "This is not over. I will find you again. I will feed on your world." "We need to get moving," I said, turning to O'Brien, who had collapsed into the co-pilot's seat after we'd sealed the submersible's hatch behind us. He didn't respond. He sat slumped in his seat, eyes open but unfocused, breathing rapid and shallow inside his helmet. "O'Brien," I tried again, reaching over to shake his shoulder. "Lieutenant Commander, we need to go." His head turned slowly toward me. "They're still there," he whispered. "I can see them all, standing behind you." I checked over my shoulder instinctively, though I knew there was nothing there, just the metal interior of our submersible. "There's nothing there," I said. "It's the entity, still in your head. You need to fight it." His eyes didn't track to mine. Instead, they moved as if following something invisible around the cabin. "My fault," he murmured. "Katie, should have been there, should have protected them." I turned back to the controls, trying to focus. The submersible's systems had come back online after we'd managed to drag ourselves back to it through those impossible corridors, but our position readings made no sense. The depth gauge alternated between showing 18,000 feet and 0. Our coordinates jumped wildly from one reading to the next. "Come on," I muttered, initiating the propulsion sequence. The engines hummed to life, but when I tried to move us forward, nothing happened. We remained suspended in the strange, starry void outside our viewport. "Jake," O'Brien said, his voice suddenly clearer. I turned, hoping he was coming back to himself. Instead, I found him staring at me with naked terror in his eyes. "It's inside me," he whispered. "I can feel it, moving." Before I could respond, he started screaming, a raw animal sound that made my skin crawl. His body went rigid, back arching against his seat as if in seizure. I unbuckled myself and moved to him, trying to hold him steady. "O'Brien, stay with me." His screaming stopped abruptly. His body relaxed. When his eyes opened again, something had changed in them. They seemed darker, emptier. "He's mine now," O'Brien said, but the voice wasn't his. The tone, the cadence, it belonged to the entity. I backed away, reaching for anything I could use as a weapon. "Get out of him." O'Brien's face twisted into a smile that didn't belong on his features. His mind was weaker than yours, so full of fear for his family, so easy to penetrate. "Let him go," I demanded, knowing how useless the words were even as I spoke them. O'Brien's head tilted at an unnatural angle. "I need a vessel, Commander, to leave this place. His will serve." I felt cold dread spreading through me. The entity hadn't just been tormenting O'Brien. It had been preparing him, breaking down his mental defenses to take control of his body. "You're still trapped," I said, trying to think through our options. "Even if you control him, you can't leave your prison." O'Brien's body stood up awkwardly, like someone learning to use a puppet. "True. The geometry of my prison extends beyond human comprehension, but there are loopholes." He took a step toward me. I backed against the control panel. "Human bodies can leave," the entity continued, using O'Brien's mouth. "If I am within one, perhaps I can slip past the barriers." "And if you can't?" I asked, playing for time while I tried to reach the emergency sedative kit stored beneath the navigation console. "Then I lose nothing. I remain as I was." O'Brien's face contorted into another unnatural smile. "But your friend stays with me forever. His consciousness will feed me for years." My hand closed around the sedative injector. If I could knock O'Brien unconscious, maybe the entity would lose its hold on him. Before I could act, O'Brien's body lurched forward with unexpected speed. His hands, O'Brien's hands, but not O'Brien's will, grabbed my suit at the shoulders. "And now you, Commander," the entity said through O'Brien's mouth. "Your mind will join his, your fear, your guilt, your delicious pain." I struggled against his grip, surprised by the strength. O'Brien was strong, but this was something else. Strength born of the entity's desperation and rage. "O'Brien," I gasped, trying to reach my friend trapped inside. "Fight it. You can push it out." For just an instant, I saw recognition flicker in his eyes. His grip loosened slightly. I took my chance, bringing up the sedative injector. Our pressure suits were designed with emergency medical access ports, small, self-sealing valves at key points that allowed for the administration of critical medications without compromising suit integrity. I pressed the injector against the port at the base of his neck, and the auto-injector hissed as it delivered its payload. O'Brien's body staggered back. His face registered shock, then anger. "What have you done?" the entity demanded, the words slurring as the sedative took effect. "Giving my friend a break," I said, watching as O'Brien's knees buckled. I caught him before he hit the floor, easing him down to the deck. His eyes fluttered, fighting the sedative's pull. "Won't last," he mumbled, and I couldn't tell if it was O'Brien speaking or the entity. "Still. Here." Then his eyes closed as the sedative pulled him under completely. I secured him to the floor with restraint straps from the emergency kit, then returned to the controls. I had to find a way out of this place while O'Brien was unconscious. The sedative would give him temporary relief from the entity's assault, but it wouldn't last forever. I tried the engines again, pushing the thrusters to maximum. Nothing happened. We remained suspended in that impossible void, neither in the ocean nor truly inside the triangular object. A noise from outside caught my attention. I moved to the viewport and felt my breath catch. Beyond our submersible, the void was changing. The star-like points of light were going out one by one, leaving expanding patches of absolute darkness. The entity was shutting down the illusion, replacing it with what? As the last lights winked out, I found myself staring into perfect blackness. Then, slowly, new images began to form. Corridors materialized around our submersible, not the alien passages we'd traversed earlier, but what looked like the interiors of other vessels. Submarines, research ships, diving bells from earlier eras. And there were people, or what had once been people. They stood motionless in these phantom corridors, men and women in various types of diving gear, naval uniforms, research team coveralls. Their eyes were open but vacant, their expressions frozen in final moments of terror or despair. I recognized some of the uniforms, Soviet naval design from the Cold War era, Japanese maritime research insignia, the logo of a Brazilian oceanographic institute that had lost a team in the Pacific 15 years ago. All of them had come here. All of them had encountered the entity. None had escaped. As I watched, horrified, the phantom spaces began to change. The walls dissolved, revealing what lay behind the illusion, rows upon rows of human remains. Hundreds of them, preserved somehow in the timeless interior of the entity's prison. Some were recent enough to be recognizable as human bodies. Others had decayed to skeletal remains. The oldest were little more than impressions in the strange material of the prison walls, as if they'd been slowly absorbed over centuries or millennia. This was the entity's collection, its food source, its power. I turned away, sickened. We weren't just facing danger to ourselves. We were confronting something that had been preying on human explorers throughout history. How many missing ships and crews throughout human history had actually ended up here, lured by the entity's call? A groan from the deck pulled my attention back to O'Brien. He stirred against his restraints, fighting the sedative. The dose should have kept him under for at least an hour, but it had been less than 20 minutes. The entity's burning through the sedative, I realized aloud. It was using O'Brien's body chemistry against the drug, pushing his system to process it faster. I had one more dose in the emergency kit. I could keep him under a while longer, but eventually I'd run out of options. And all the while, the entity would be working to take over his mind completely. I had to find a way out. I turned back to the controls, checking every system, looking for anything that might break us free of this place. I tried the communications array, but as expected, there was nothing. Just dead air and static. We were completely cut off from the surface, just as we had been since entering the entity's domain. No help would come from outside. We were on our own. I checked the navigation systems again, hoping for any clue about our actual position. The readings continued to fluctuate wildly, as if the submersible couldn't determine where or when we were. A laugh came from behind me. O'Brien's voice, but not O'Brien's laugh. I turned to find him awake, his eyes open and fixed on me with malevolent awareness. "They can't help you," the entity said through O'Brien's mouth. "No one can. You're mine now, just like all the others." "The sedative should have kept you under longer," I said, eyeing the second injector I'd placed on the console. O'Brien's body strained against the restraints. "This body is mine to control. Its chemical processes, its neurological responses. I accelerated the metabolism of your drug." "Let him go," I said. "He has a family, a child." "A weakness," the entity replied dismissively. "One I exploited. His fear for them made him vulnerable." The restraints creaked as O'Brien's body pulled against them with unnatural strength. One of the straps snapped. I grabbed the second injector, but before I could move toward him, O'Brien's free hand shot out and caught my wrist in a grip like iron. "No more sleep," the entity said, twisting my wrist until I dropped the injector. "Now we finish this." O'Brien's other hand broke free of its restraint. He sat up, then stood, the remaining straps tearing like paper against strength no human should possess. I backed away, looking for anything I could use to defend myself. But in the cramped confines of the submersible, there were few options. O'Brien stalked toward me, his movements jerky yet purposeful, like a marionette controlled by an unskilled puppeteer. "Your friend is nearly gone," the entity said. "His consciousness fades. Soon, only I will remain in this flesh." "O'Brien," I tried again, appealing to whatever might be left of my friend. "Tom, remember Katie. Remember your promise to come home." Something flickered across O'Brien's face. Pain, recognition, a momentary return of his true self. "Jake," he gasped, his voice his own again. "Kill me. You have to. Kill me. It's the only way to keep it contained." His face contorted as the entity fought to regain control. "Ignore him," it growled. "He's too weak to resist me for long." "Tom," I said urgently, "tell me how to help you, how to get it out of you." O'Brien's eyes cleared briefly. "You can't," he said, his voice breaking. "It's too deep now, in my mind, showing me things, horrible things it's done, what it plans to do if it escapes." He took a shuddering breath, fighting for each word. "It's ancient, Jake, older than humanity. It fed on civilizations before ours, driven them to extinction. It won't stop." His back arched suddenly as the entity reasserted control. When his face relaxed, the expression was once again alien. "Enough," the entity said coldly. "Time to join your friend, Commander." O'Brien's hands reached for me again. I dodged, slipping past him to the other side of the submersible. But there was nowhere to run, nowhere to hide in the confined space. "You can't win," the entity said through O'Brien. "You can't leave. Accept your fate. Join your friend in feeding me." I backed against the control panel, my hands searching blindly for anything I could use as a weapon. My fingers brushed against a maintenance tool, a heavy wrench used for emergency repairs. "I'm sorry, Tom," I whispered, gripping the wrench. As O'Brien lunged at me, I swung the wrench, connecting with the side of his helmet. The impact cracked the faceplate and sent him staggering backward. He crashed into the opposite wall, momentarily stunned. I hated myself for hurting my friend, but I knew it wasn't really him anymore. The entity had taken over, using his body while destroying his mind. "Jake," O'Brien's voice came weakly through his damaged helmet, his own voice filled with pain and desperation. "The controls, emergency release, airlock." I glanced at the airlock controls. The emergency release would open the outer door without cycling the air pressure, a measure designed only for the most desperate situations. At this depth, the result would be catastrophic. "I can't," I said, understanding what he was asking me to do. "You have to," he insisted, fighting to maintain control against the entity's influence. "It can't be allowed to escape. Too dangerous." The entity must have realized what O'Brien was suggesting. His body convulsed violently, then went rigid. When he spoke again, the voice had returned to the entity's cold tone. "He's gone," it said, "buried so deep in his own mind he'll never surface again." It made O'Brien's body stand, ignoring the cracked faceplate and the injuries I'd inflicted. "Now it's your turn, Commander. Will you join willingly, or must I take your mind by force?" I gripped the wrench tighter, though I knew it would do little good against whatever was now wearing O'Brien's body like a suit. "Neither," I said, backing toward the airlock. "I'm leaving, and you're staying here." The entity laughed with O'Brien's mouth. "You can't leave. I control this place. Every corridor, every path. There is no way out except through me." "We'll see about that," I said, stepping into the airlock chamber. The entity realized my intention too late. It lunged forward, but I slapped the interior door control. The door slid shut just as O'Brien's possessed body slammed against it. "You cannot escape me," the entity roared, the words coming through both the radio in my helmet and somehow directly into my mind. "Open this door." I ignored it, turning to face the outer door controls. If I cycled through normally, the entity would simply be waiting when I emerged back inside its prison. But if I used the emergency release? My hand hovered over the control. Using it would expose the airlock to whatever lay beyond, whether that was the crushing depth of the ocean or the impossible physics of the entity's prison. Either way, it would likely be fatal, but it might be my only chance to escape with my mind intact. O'Brien's body continued to pound on the inner door, the metal beginning to dent under the inhuman strength the entity was channeling through him. "Open the door, Commander," the entity demanded, "or I will tear it open and pull you back piece by piece." The pounding intensified. The door wouldn't hold much longer. I thought of Sarah, of how I'd failed to be there when she needed me most. Was I failing O'Brien the same way, abandoning him to save myself? But this was different. O'Brien himself had told me to go, to prevent the entity from escaping. His last act of free will had been to try to save me, and potentially countless others. "I'm sorry, Tom," I said softly, then pressed the emergency release. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the outer door slid open, and chaos erupted. I expected to be crushed by ocean pressure or torn apart by the vacuum of the entity's void. Instead, I found myself in a strange transitional zone, neither fully in the entity's prison nor in the normal ocean. The physics here seemed to bend and warp, creating a buffer between the two realities. A powerful current pulled me forward, away from the submersible. Behind me, I heard the entity's scream of rage, first through O'Brien's voice, then in its own terrible, multi-toned howl that vibrated through my skull. The current carried me through what felt like a membrane, a boundary between the entity's domain and the natural world. But just as I thought I might break through to the ocean beyond, everything stopped. The current, the movement, the sensation of transition, all of it ceased in an instant. I hung suspended in the liminal space, neither in the entity's domain nor free of it. The membrane had become solid, trapping me between worlds. "Did you think it would be so easy?" The entity's voice filled my mind, no longer needing O'Brien's mouth to speak. "Your friend's body may be mine, but you still belong to me as well." Through the translucent barrier, I could see O'Brien's possessed form approaching. Behind him, the submersible floated abandoned, its airlock still open. The entity had somehow left the vessel to pursue me directly. O'Brien's body stopped on the other side of the barrier, his eyes now completely black, reflecting nothing. The entity was using him as an anchor point, a physical connection to maintain its hold on me, even as I tried to escape. "You cannot leave without my permission," the entity continued, "and I am not finished with you." I pushed against the barrier, but it was like pressing against solid steel. I was trapped in this in-between place, neither free nor fully captured. Behind O'Brien's possessed form, I could see the phantom corridors returning, the spectral forms of previous victims watching with empty eyes. Among them now stood a new figure, O'Brien himself, or rather, a projection of his consciousness. His eyes were vacant, his expression slack. The entity had buried his mind deep within itself, keeping just enough of him intact to use as bait. "This is not over, Commander. I will be waiting, and your friend will be waiting with me." The entity's final threat echoed in my mind as I swam upward, fighting against the increasing pressure. My suit's emergency systems blared warnings about depth and structural integrity, but I kept moving. I had to get away from that thing, had to reach the surface and warn everyone about what waited in the darkness below. But with each stroke upward, my thoughts circled back to O'Brien, trapped inside that impossible prison with a creature that fed on suffering and fear. I'd left him behind, my friend, my partner, the man who'd saved my life more times than I could count. I paused in my ascent, looking back toward the triangular object now barely visible in the darkness below. The blue pulses had slowed, becoming more rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. The entity had retreated, taking O'Brien with it. "I can give you what you want most, Commander." The voice came from nowhere and everywhere, bypassing my radio to speak directly into my mind. I tried to block it out, to keep swimming, but my limbs suddenly felt like lead. "Your sister's soul for your friend's life." A simple exchange. A figure materialized in the water before me. Sarah, exactly as she'd looked the last time I saw her alive. Her dark hair floated around her face like a halo in the water, though she shouldn't have been able to exist at this depth without protection. "Jake," she said, her voice impossibly clear, "you can save us both." I knew it wasn't real, knew it was the entity reaching out, using the last of its influence before I escaped its range. But knowing didn't stop the pain of seeing her face, hearing her voice. "You're not my sister," I said, the words sounding hollow inside my helmet. "You're just using her image." Sarah's face grew sad. "Is that what you believe? That I'm not real?" She reached toward me, her hand stopping just short of touching my faceplate. "I'm trapped, Jake, just like your friend. The entity found me in the darkness after death. It's kept me all these years." I felt my resolve waver. What if it was telling the truth? What if, somehow, it had found Sarah's consciousness after her death? The thought made my heart beat faster, hope warring with the rational part of my mind that recognized manipulation. Even if that were possible, I said carefully, why would you offer to release her now? What do you gain? Sarah's image flickered, revealing the entity's darkness beneath before stabilizing again. A trade, she said simply. Your sister's soul and your friend's life, for your willing submission. You want me to take O'Brien's place, I translated. Sarah nodded. The prison requires a conscious occupant. I cannot leave without someone staying behind. Her expression turned pleading. You've carried the guilt of my death for 5 years, Jake. Wouldn't you rather it meant something? Sacrifice yourself and save 2 souls instead of escaping alone with nothing but your guilt as company. The offer sliced through my defenses with surgical precision. It knew exactly where to cut, which wounds were still raw even after 5 years. The guilt I'd carried over Sarah's death, that I hadn't been there when she needed me, had defined my life since the accident. And now I was abandoning O'Brien too. How would it work? I asked, hating myself for even considering it. Sarah's image brightened, hope filling her features. Return to the object. Enter the central chamber with the liquid pool. Place your hands in it and surrender yourself willingly. In exchange, I'll release both your sister and your friend. I stared at her face. So perfect, so detailed. The entity had pulled every nuance from my memories, crafting an irresistible lure. It knew I would die for Sarah if given the chance. Knew I would sacrifice myself for O'Brien without hesitation. But something about the offer felt wrong. If you can free Sarah's soul, why haven't you used that as your bargaining chip before now? I asked. Why wait until I'm escaping? Sarah's image wavered slightly. I needed to know you were worthy of the exchange. No, I said, understanding dawning. You're desperate. I'm getting away, and you're trying anything to bring me back. Her expression hardened in a way Sarah's never had in life. You're making a terrible mistake. This is your only chance to save them both. If you really had Sarah, you would have shown me proof, I said, more confident now. You would have let her speak with her own voice, not just recycled my memories. The image of Sarah began to distort, her features elongating, darkness bleeding through the human disguise. You will regret this choice, the entity said, Sarah's voice giving way to its multi-toned howl. I will keep your friend for eternity. His suffering will be legendary. I pushed against the water, continuing my ascent. You don't have my sister, I said. You never did. You're just a parasite feeding on my guilt. The false Sarah's face contorted with rage. She died calling your name, screaming for her brother who promised to protect her. The words cut deep, but I recognized them for what they were. The entity's last desperate attempt to use my guilt as a weapon, the same tactic it had been using since we first entered its domain. You didn't know her, I said, my voice stronger now. Sarah wouldn't want me to trade my life for hers. She'd kick my ass for even considering it. That's how I know you're lying. The image of Sarah dissolved completely, replaced by the swirling darkness of the entity's true form. It reached for me with tendrils of shadow that fell just short, its influence weakening as I moved farther from its prison. I offer you one last chance, Commander, it said, its mental voice fading. Return and surrender yourself, or your friend suffers eternally. I looked back at the triangular object below, its blue pulses now barely visible in the distance. O'Brien was down there, his body possessed, his mind trapped. My friend, the man I'd promised to bring home safely. I'll find a way back for you, Tom, I said quietly. Not the way this thing wants, but I'll find a way. The entity's presence faded from my mind as I continued upward, the crushing pressure of the deep ocean growing stronger with each meter. My suit creaked and groaned under stress it was never meant to endure. The emergency oxygen supply blinked warnings on my heads-up display. 30 minutes remaining, then 28, then 25. I wouldn't make it to the surface before running out of air. Not swimming, not from this depth. But I remembered the USS Defender waiting above. If I could signal them somehow, let them know I was alive and ascending. I reached for the emergency beacon on my suit. The button was designed for surface operations, not extreme depths, but it was my only option. I pressed it hard, then again for good measure. A small light on my wrist panel began blinking, indicating the distress signal was active. Now all I could do was keep moving and hope someone was listening. The darkness around me was absolute, except for the small circle illuminated by my helmet lights. No fish, no marine life of any kind at this depth. Just the black water and crushing pressure threatening to collapse my suit at any moment. As I swam, my thoughts returned to O'Brien. I saw his face in those final moments, his eyes black and empty as the entity took complete control. I heard his last words in his own voice. "Kill me. You have to. Kill me. It's the only way to keep it contained." But I couldn't do it. Couldn't kill my friend, even to save him from possession. Instead, I'd run, escaping while leaving him trapped in that nightmare prison. Some part of me knew I'd made the only choice I could. If I'd stayed, we'd both be prisoners now. Food for an entity that had waited 10,000 years for fresh minds to torture. But knowing that didn't ease the weight in my chest or quiet the voice in my head that whispered I'd abandoned him just like I'd abandoned Sarah. My oxygen supply continued to drop. 20 minutes, then 15. My ascent was too slow. I wouldn't make it. Just as despair threatened to overwhelm me, my radio crackled to life. "Pete, DSV signal detected. Commander Morrison, do you copy? This is USS Defender. We have your beacon. Do you copy?" The voice was broken, distorted by depth and distance, but unmistakably human. They'd found my signal. "This is Morrison," I responded, trying to keep the desperation from my voice. "I'm at approximately 16,000 feet, ascending. Oxygen critical. Need immediate extraction." Static answered me, then fragments of a response. "Sending recovery. Hold position. Tracking your..." The transmission cut out, but hope surged through me. They knew I was here. They were coming. I kept swimming upward, pushing against exhaustion. My mind drifted as oxygen levels dropped, memories blurring with present reality. I saw Sarah's face, not the entity's perfect recreation, but the real Sarah, with her crooked smile and the tiny scar above her eyebrow. I saw O'Brien during our first mission together, his face younger, but already showing the confidence that would make him such a reliable partner. I saw the entity in its true form. Darkness, given shape, ancient and hungry. A sound penetrated my oxygen-deprived haze, the distinctive whine of descent thrusters. I looked up and saw lights cutting through the darkness above me. A rescue submersible, smaller than our DSV-4, but equipped for rapid response and recovery. "Commander Morrison, do you copy?" The voice came through clearer now. "We have visual. Hold position. Preparing retrieval arm." I stopped swimming, floating in the black water as the rescue vessel maneuvered above me. A mechanical arm extended from its underside, reaching toward me with a retrieval harness. "Grab the harness and secure it around your chest," the voice instructed. "We'll pull you in." I reached for the harness with numb fingers, struggling to secure it properly. Once it was fastened, I gave a thumbs up toward the vessel's cameras. The retrieval arm began to retract, pulling me upward toward the submersible's airlock. As I rose, I looked down one last time into the darkness below. For just a moment, I thought I saw a flash of blue light in the distance, a pulse from the triangular object, a final message from the entity. But then it was gone, leaving only darkness. The airlock opened above me, and hands reached down to pull me inside. As the outer door sealed shut, I collapsed onto the metal deck, my body finally giving in to exhaustion. The last thing I remember before losing consciousness was a technician removing my helmet and the sweet rush of clean air filling my lungs. I drifted in and out of awareness as they brought me up to the surface. Fragments of conversations reached me through the haze. Only one? Where's O'Brien? Suit integrity failing at multiple points. Admiral wants him in debrief as soon as... Blood oxygen levels dangerously low. Hell happened down there. When I finally regained full consciousness, I was in the medical bay of the USS Defender. An oxygen mask covered my face, and monitoring equipment beeped steadily around me. Admiral Collins stood at the foot of my bed, his expression grim. "Commander," he said, noticing I was awake. "Good to have you back." I pulled the oxygen mask down. "O'Brien," I said, my voice hoarse. "We need to go back for him." Collins's face revealed nothing. "What happened down there, Commander? Where is Lieutenant Commander O'Brien?" "Still inside," I managed. "The object, it's not what we thought. It's a prison, holding something that took O'Brien." Collins exchanged looks with the medical officer standing nearby. "You're suffering from oxygen deprivation, Commander. We'll talk after you've had proper rest and medical evaluation." "No," I insisted, trying to sit up. The room spun around me. "You don't understand. It's still down there, still alive. And it has O'Brien." Collins put a hand on my shoulder, firmly pushing me back down. "Rest now. That's an order. We'll debrief fully when you're stable." I wanted to argue, to make him understand the horror waiting in the darkness below, but exhaustion pulled me under again. The last thing I saw was Collins leaning close to the medical officer, speaking words I couldn't hear. When I woke next, the ship was moving. I could feel the engine's vibration through the bed. We were leaving the site, leaving O'Brien behind. I tore off the monitoring leads and oxygen mask, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. My body protested with waves of pain and dizziness, but I forced myself to stand. I had to find Collins, had to make him understand. A Navy corpsman rushed in as alarms from the disconnected monitors sounded. "Commander, you need to remain in bed. You're not cleared." "Where's Admiral Collins?" I demanded, grabbing the doorframe for support. "I need to speak with him now." "Sir, please." I pushed past him, stumbling into the corridor. The ship's layout was familiar enough that I knew where to go. The command center would be 2 decks up, forward section. I made it to the elevator before my legs gave out. 2 crewmen helped me up, concerned but not stopping me when I told them I needed to see the Admiral. Something in my expression must have convinced them it was urgent. Collins was in the command center, as expected, looking at sonar readings with the ship's captain. He turned as I was half carried in by the crewman. "Commander Morrison," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "You should be in medical." "You're leaving," I accused, gesturing toward the displays showing our position moving away from the dive site. "We can't leave him down there." Collins dismissed the other personnel with a nod, waiting until only he, the captain, and I remained. "Commander, you were the only survivor we recovered. According to your preliminary statement, the DSV-4 was lost, along with Lieutenant Commander O'Brien." "Not lost," I corrected. "Taken, by the entity inside that object. We need to go back. We need to find a way to get him out." Collins studied me for a long moment. "Commander, we've been monitoring the site continuously since your emergency beacon activated. There's nothing there." "What do you mean, nothing? The triangular object is there, 18,000 feet down." "No, Commander, it's gone." Those 3 words hit me like physical blows. "That's not possible. It was embedded in the seafloor. It's been there for 10,000 years." The captain pulled up a sonar image on the main display. "This is the current scan of the area. The seafloor is undisturbed, no object, no structural anomalies of any kind." I stared at the image, unable to process what I was seeing. The seafloor appeared perfectly normal, with no sign of the massive triangular object that had dominated every scan just days ago. It can't be gone. It was right there. My voice sounded distant, even to myself. We were inside it. Collins placed a hand on my shoulder, his touch surprisingly gentle. "Jake," he said, using my first name for the first time I could remember. "I believe something happened down there, something we don't yet understand. But right now, there's nothing at those coordinates, nothing to go back for." The implications crashed through my oxygen-deprived brain. The object hadn't just sealed itself, it had vanished entirely, taking O'Brien with it. To where? Another location? Another dimension? Was that even possible? My legs buckled, and Collins guided me to a nearby chair. "The thing inside," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. It said it had been imprisoned by its own kind, that it had fed on other civilizations before ours. What if it's free now? What if it's using O'Brien to escape? Collins and the captain exchanged looks I couldn't interpret. "Commander, I think you should return to medical. We'll conduct a full debriefing once we reach port and you've been properly evaluated." "You think I'm hallucinating?" I realized. That the oxygen deprivation affected my mind. "I think you've been through a traumatic experience," Collins replied carefully, "and that we need to proceed methodically to understand exactly what happened." I knew how it would go. The evaluation would document oxygen deprivation, extreme stress, possible hallucinations. The debriefing would pick apart my testimony, finding inconsistencies and impossibilities. The mission would be classified, the records sealed, and O'Brien would be listed as lost in action, his body never recovered. Another failure. Another person I couldn't save. "It's real," I said, meeting Collins's gaze directly. "Everything I saw down there, the entity, what it did to O'Brien, what it plans to do if it escapes its prison. It's all real." Collins's expression softened slightly. "Get some rest, Commander. We'll talk more when you're stronger." 2 medical personnel appeared at the door. Summoned by Collins, I realized. They helped me up, supporting me as they led me back toward the medical bay. As we passed a viewport, I looked out at the dark waters of the Pacific. Somewhere out there, or perhaps nowhere at all anymore, was the triangular object with its ancient prisoner, and O'Brien. "I'll find a way back for you," I whispered, though I had no idea how to fulfill that promise. "Whatever it takes." The medical staff eased me back onto the bed, reconnecting monitors and replacing the oxygen mask. One of them prepared a syringe, a sedative, I assumed. As the drug entered my system, my thoughts grew fuzzy around the edges, but one remained crystal clear. The entity had said this wasn't over, that it would be waiting. I believed it. This wasn't the end. Somehow, someday, I would face that thing again. And next time, I wouldn't be leaving without O'Brien. The sedative pulled me under, into darkness that thankfully held no dreams. No visions of Sarah accusing me of abandonment. No glimpses of O'Brien trapped in that impossible prison. Just empty blackness that offered temporary peace from the knowledge that I had survived while my friend remained behind, lost to something ancient and hungry that now knew the taste of human minds. I spent 3 days in the medical bay of the USS Defender as we sailed back toward Naval Base Coronado. The medical team treated me for decompression sickness, oxygen deprivation, and what they clinically termed acute stress reaction. Their polite way of saying I was falling apart. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw O'Brien's face as the entity took control of him. I heard his last words before the possession became complete. "Kill me. It's the only way to keep it contained." I should have listened. Maybe then the thing would still be trapped instead of potentially free, using my friend as its vessel. On the 4th morning, the ship's doctor cleared me for limited movement. I walked the corridors of the Defender, searching for anyone who might have information about what happened after my rescue. Most of the crew avoided eye contact. Those who didn't looked at me with a mixture of pity and unease. I found the sonar technician who'd been on duty during my recovery. Young kid, couldn't have been more than 22. When I asked him about the triangular object, his eyes darted around to make sure no one was listening. "They told us not to discuss it with you, sir," he said quietly. "Admiral's orders." "I was down there," I said. "I saw it. I need to know what happened after I was recovered." He hesitated, then spoke barely above a whisper. "It was the strangest thing I've ever seen on sonar. 1 minute it was there, just like it had been for weeks. The next, nothing, like it blinked out of existence." He shook his head. "The Admiral had us run diagnostics, thinking it was equipment failure, but everything checked out. Whatever that thing was, sir, it's gone. Gone." The word echoed in my mind, not destroyed, not defeated, just gone, with O'Brien inside it. When we docked at Coronado, I was immediately transported to the secure medical facility on base. The doctors there ran more tests, checked my brain for damage from oxygen deprivation, and asked endless questions about what I remembered. I told them the truth, most of it anyway. I left out the parts about Sarah. Those were mine alone. On the 6th day after my return, Admiral Collins arrived with 2 men I didn't recognize. One wore the uniform of Naval Intelligence. The other was in a dark suit that screamed government agency, though he carried no identification. "Commander Morrison," Collins said as they entered my hospital room. "How are you feeling?" "Ready to get out of here, sir," I answered, sitting up straighter in the bed. Collins nodded to the nurse, who left the room. The door closed with a soft click that somehow sounded final. "This is Commander Wilson from Naval Intelligence," Collins said, indicating the uniformed man. "And Mr. Reeves from the Department of Defense." The man in the suit gave a curt nod, but remained silent. "We need your complete account of what happened down there, Commander," Collins continued. "From the beginning." I took a deep breath and told them everything. The discovery of the object, its response to our presence, being pulled inside, the impossible space we found ourselves in, the entity and its prison, and O'Brien's possession. As I spoke, Wilson took notes while Reeves watched me with unblinking intensity. Collins remained expressionless, though I caught flickers of concern when I described the entity's abilities and its claims of having consumed other civilizations. When I finished, the room fell silent. Wilson looked up from his notes with an expression I couldn't read. Reeves whispered something to Collins that made the Admiral's jaw tighten. "Commander Morrison," Collins finally said, "I want to be clear about something. You believe this entity is still alive? That it's using Lieutenant Commander O'Brien's body as a vessel?" "Yes, sir. I believe it's using him to escape its prison." Collins exchanged glances with the others before continuing. "And you believe it poses a significant threat not just to naval personnel, but potentially to humanity as a whole?" "That's what it told us, sir. It said it had driven entire civilizations to extinction before ours." Reeves spoke for the first time, his voice surprisingly soft for a man with such hard eyes. "But you have no evidence of this beyond the entity's own claims, correct?" I stared at him. "With respect, sir, I saw what it could do. It created perfect illusions indistinguishable from reality. It accessed our deepest memories and used them against us. It possessed my partner. What more evidence do you need?" "Physical evidence, Commander," Reeves replied smoothly. "Something beyond the testimony of a man who experienced severe oxygen deprivation at extreme depths." I felt heat rise in my face. "You think I imagined all this?" Collins held up a hand. "No one is suggesting that, Commander, but we must consider all possibilities, including the effects of your physical condition on your perception of events." "What about the object itself?" I demanded. "The triangular structure that appeared on every scan for weeks? That wasn't my imagination." "The object was real," Collins acknowledged. "Its disappearance is unexplained." "And the ROV you lost the week before, the other expeditions that disappeared at that location, were those my imagination too?" Wilson cleared his throat. "Commander, we're not dismissing your experience. But without corroborating evidence, without Lieutenant Commander O'Brien or the DSV-4, without even the object itself remaining at the site, you must understand our position. I understood perfectly. They weren't going to believe me, or at least, they weren't going to officially believe me. Collins leaned forward. "Jake," he said, dropping formality, "I've known you for 15 years. You're one of the best officers I've ever worked with. If you tell me something happened down there, I believe you experienced it. But my belief doesn't constitute evidence." I looked away, staring out the small window at the naval base beyond. Sailors went about their duties, unaware of what waited in the darkness of the deep ocean, or what might no longer be waiting there. "What happens now?" I asked quietly. Collins straightened. "The mission has been classified as a failure. All records have been sealed under presidential order. The official report will state that the DSV-4 was lost due to a catastrophic hull failure at depth, with Lieutenant Commander O'Brien presumed dead. You were able to escape via emergency protocols, but suffered oxygen deprivation that affected your recall of events." I turned back to face them, anger building inside me. "That's a lie." "It's the official conclusion," Reeves corrected, "based on the available evidence." "What about the object? What about all the sonar data, the electromagnetic readings?" "Classified," Wilson said simply. "Above top secret." "And what about O'Brien?" I asked, my voice breaking slightly. "Are we just leaving him down there, abandoning him to that thing?" Collins's expression softened. "Jake, the object is gone. We've had ships scanning the area continuously since your recovery. There's nothing there. No trace of it. No anomalous readings. Nothing. Even if we wanted to mount a rescue mission, and believe me, I would if I could, there's nowhere to go." I closed my eyes, trying to process what they were telling me. O'Brien was gone. The entity was gone. And they wanted me to accept that, to move on, as if none of it had happened. "What about me?" I asked finally. "What happens to me now?" Collins glanced at the others before answering. "You'll be placed on medical leave for 60 days, pending psychological evaluation. After that, assuming you're cleared, you'll return to active duty." "And if I talk about what really happened?" Reeves smiled thinly. "That would be unfortunate, Commander, for your career and your future." The threat was clear. Keep quiet or be discredited, maybe even discharged on psychological grounds. "Do we understand each other?" Collins asked, his tone gentle but firm. I looked at each of them in turn, these men who had decided the truth was too dangerous to acknowledge. "Yes, sir. I understand perfectly." They left soon after, taking their notebooks and their lies with them. I sat alone in the hospital room, watching the sun set over the Pacific. Somewhere out there, beyond the horizon, beyond the continental shelf, at depths few humans had ever reached, O'Brien had been taken by something ancient and malevolent. And now I was expected to forget it ever happened. I made a silent promise then, to O'Brien, to myself. I would find answers. I would find a way back, no matter what it took. 2 months passed. I went through the motions of recovery, physical therapy, psychological evaluations, debriefing sessions with naval intelligence that always circled around the same questions, searching for inconsistencies in my story. I gave them nothing. I repeated the truth exactly as I'd experienced it, refusing to doubt myself despite their hints that my memory had been compromised by oxygen deprivation. They released me back to active duty with a notation in my file about possible lingering effects of traumatic event and a recommendation for continued psychological monitoring. I was assigned to training operations, teaching younger officers diving procedures and emergency protocols. Safe, controlled work that kept me far from any actual missions. I took an apartment off base in Coronado, a small place overlooking the bay. Each morning I would watch naval vessels coming and going, wondering if any of them were secretly investigating what we had found. Each night I dreamed of O'Brien trapped in that impossible space, his consciousness slowly being consumed by the entity. I started my own investigation in what little free time I had. The naval archives contained records of unexplained disappearances dating back decades. Research vessels, submarines, even civilian craft that had vanished without distress calls over oceanic trenches and abyssal plains. Most had official explanations: mechanical failure, human error, extreme weather. But patterns emerged when I looked closer. 3 weeks after returning to duty, I was approached by a woman in civilian clothes as I left the base. She fell into step beside me, not looking at me as she spoke. "Commander Morrison, my name is Dr. Elena Petrov. I was part of the team that analyzed the initial sonar readings of the object you encountered." I kept walking, not breaking stride. "I can't discuss classified information, Dr. Petrov." "I know what you saw down there," she continued as if I hadn't spoken, "and I know they're covering it up." I stopped then, turning to face her. She was in her 40s, with streaks of gray in her dark hair and eyes that had seen too much. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you're not the only one asking questions." She handed me a flash drive. "My private research. Things they didn't include in the official briefing. If you want to talk after you've looked at it, my number is in the files." She walked away before I could respond. I stood there holding the drive, knowing it could end my career if I was caught with it. "I should have turned it in immediately," reported the contact. "Instead, I took it home and plugged it into my personal laptop." The files contained data I'd never seen before: analysis of the object's electromagnetic signature compared to other unexplained phenomena around the world, sonar anomalies from the Mariana Trench that matched the patterns we'd detected, satellite imagery of geometric structures on the ocean floor off the coast of Antarctica, hidden beneath thousands of feet of water and ice. Most disturbing were the historical records, ancient texts and carvings from civilizations around the world depicting triangular objects descending from the sky or rising from the sea. Stories of entities that fed on fear and suffering that could create illusions and possess human bodies. It wasn't just one object. It wasn't just one entity. There were more of them. Maybe many more. I called the number the next day. Dr. Petrov answered on the first ring. "You've seen it," she said. Not a question. "Yes." "Then you understand what we're dealing with." "I need to know more," I said. "Everything you have." "Not over the phone. Meet me tomorrow, 9 in the morning. Cabrillo National Monument, by the lighthouse." She hung up before I could agree. I spent the night reviewing her files again, looking for anything that might help me understand what had happened to O'Brien, what might still be happening to him. The next morning dawned gray and foggy, appropriate for a meeting about darkness and secrets. I arrived at the lighthouse early, watching tourists take pictures of the view while I waited for Petrov. 9 came and went, then 9:30. By 10, I knew something was wrong. I tried her number, but it went straight to voicemail. I drove to the address listed in her files, an apartment in a quiet neighborhood north of the city. The door was ajar when I arrived. Inside, the place had been ransacked. Papers and books scattered across the floor, computer equipment missing, furniture overturned. In the center of her desk was a single piece of paper with handwritten coordinates. Nothing else. No note, no explanation. Just numbers pointing to a location in the Pacific, hundreds of miles from where our triangular object had been. I memorized the coordinates, then left before anyone could connect me to the scene. On the way back to my apartment, I wondered who had gotten to Petrov, government agents silencing a leak, or something worse. Had the entity reached her somehow? Was it already extending its influence beyond the depths? That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing O'Brien's face as the entity took control, hearing its final threat. "This is not over, Commander. I will be waiting." It had been waiting 10,000 years before we found it. Patience was its specialty. The next morning, I requested emergency leave, citing personal issues. My commanding officer approved it with visible relief, one less problem for him to worry about. I booked a flight to Seattle using my personal credit card, then drove to a public library and used their computer to access oceanographic databases, looking for information about the coordinates Petrov had left. The location was over a deep ocean trench, much like our original site. And according to recent seismic surveys, something had changed there in the past 2 weeks. A new structure had appeared on the ocean floor, a perfect triangular shape approximately 50 meters on each side, just like the one we had found, just like the one that had vanished with O'Brien inside it. I sat back from the computer, my heart pounding. The entity had moved its prison, or perhaps it had freed itself and abandoned the original prison, leaving it to disappear while it established a new presence elsewhere. Either way, I now had a destination. A place to begin searching for O'Brien, for answers about what we had encountered. As I left the library, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "You're not alone in this search. Others have found them too. Be careful who you trust." I stopped on the sidewalk, looking around for whoever might have sent the message, but saw only strangers going about their day, unaware of the horror lurking in the deep places of the world. Back in my apartment, I packed what I would need: clothes, emergency cash, the flash drive with Petrov's research. As I was about to leave, I noticed something odd about my reflection in the bathroom mirror. For just a moment, it seemed to lag behind my movements, as if the image was following me rather than reflecting me. I remembered the entity's prison, how it had created identical duplicates of O'Brien and me, how it had shown us reflections that moved independently. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. "You're not getting in my head again," I said to the empty apartment. "I'm coming for you, and I'm bringing O'Brien home." The reflection smiled at me, a smile I hadn't made. I backed out of the bathroom, grabbed my bag, and left without looking back. The entity wanted me to know it was watching. Fine, let it watch. Let it wait. This time, I would be prepared. As I drove toward the airport, I realized this wasn't just about saving O'Brien anymore. Petrov's research had shown me the bigger picture. These objects, these prisons or vessels, or whatever they truly were, existed all over the world, hidden in the deepest parts of the ocean, waiting to be found by unsuspecting humans who would become their next victims. What I had experienced was only the beginning of a much larger, more terrifying truth, and I was perhaps the only person alive who understood exactly what humanity was facing.